Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Upset Podcast. We're happy that you are tuned in for yet another week, and we're going to bring on my fellow Upsetters. What's up, crew?
Hey.
Hey, good to see everyone.
Howdy.
Welcome back. You guys ready for another lively discussion? I know you are. I know you are.
One of us just looks so different than he normally looks.
Yeah. Quite fatherly, if you will, right?
Yeah.
Little baby
that glow.
That beatific glow.
Little baby hat.
Yeah.
So, we want to officially congratulate our fellow upsetter,
Amen.
Pastor Justin Pierre, the new father of baby girl. Give us her name again, Justin.
Elizabeth Grace Pierre.
All right.
Oh, nice.
Beautiful name.
I have a question for you, Justin. Do you love it when we call you Big Papa?
Oh, yeah. I love it.
I love it. So congrats to you and Jackie. I'm pretty sure you heard our discussion last week. A very hot topic right now.
Oh, yeah.
On police brutality. And as you heard, we couldn't fit it all into one broadcast. So we said we have to bring this back. And so since you weren't here with us last week, we said, let's let GP start us off and let's tackle this thing once again. So what you got for us today?
Awesome. So y'all, in 1988, the American group NWA released a song entitled F the Police. A song about police brutality and racial profiling. And it seems like in 2021, this is the sentiment of the street. This is the sentiment of the street right now. F the police. And the reason why, because the amounts of excessive brutality and murder that we have seen at the hand of state-sponsored violence. And so we're just continuing this conversation. We're not saying F the police, but this is how we feel because we're frustrated. We saw the verdict of George Floyd, and the same day we saw what happened to Ma'Khia Bryant. We heard what happened to Dante Wright. We heard about what happened to Isaiah Brown in Virginia. Imagine your car breaking down. A police gives you a ride home. You have a dispute with your family member. You call the police, and that same cop shoots you 10 times. And now you're fighting for your life. And so this is why we're mad, because we're frustrated. We're sick and tired of being tired. And we're going to talk about the origins of policing, what we can do to make a difference, and why there is so little white outrage about the situation. And so we're going to start with the history of policing. We talk about the system being broken, but it's not broken. It's working as designed.
Have mercy.
So, team, what do we know about the history of policing? What framework or backdrop can we provide for a context for this conversation?
Well, I mean, just with the F the police thing, and here in the city of Philadelphia, Michael Cord, who's a well-known attorney, echoed that statement, F the police, but he says, but in Philadelphia, we're saying F the police being film the police. And so the ability to document police behavior that we have always known was there, and that we have always reported, but nobody believed it until Rodney King, when they saw it, and the shock was so egregious that many white eyes said, even though I see it, I still don't believe it. At this point, it has now come to pass that truth is starting to throw its weight around, and people are beginning to believe what's being documented and what's being seen. And so now we have to wrestle with what our eyes have seen and with some other issues as well.
Well, when you think about police, and I think when you went back to the history of police, I was just watching this the other day. Police really started to came together to police runaway slaves.
Yes,
that is where it really came from.
Wow.
You were really being we were really being protected by a National Guard, if you will, or national police. So can you imagine what it's like to catch a slave and be able to bring a slave back? Because it was a crime to run away, right? So it's almost like you're stealing yourself away from who you belong to if you ran. And so this is where policing came out, and then it went to the big cities, New York, Boston, in the early 1800s. Now you had police officers who were who basically were funded by people who considered not just black but immigrants. It started to grow around controlling immigrants. So the original reason for policing is it's not for the people who really need to be policed. I hate to put it that way, but it's for them to control. And we're still here. We're still here.
Wow.
And could that be the reason why the people are not as vocal as they should be against it? Because it was widely accepted, the policing and their methods when it was gathering the slaves back to return. Could that be why now there's so minimal outrage from certain sects of the people, because it has always been accepted? I do want to say that that there is such a difference when black and browns are approached versus when other races, especially Caucasians, I must say, because I viewed this video of remember the young white guy that was walking with his big gun? He was walking toward the police. He had already shot someone. I think he shot at 3 people, right? He'd already shot, but he was embraced because of his Second Amendment rights. We don't have Second Amendment rights, because if we have a gun, we're gangsters, right? We are allowed to be shot. And so when you go back to the origin of the police and how they had authority to treat, blacks a certain way, when we are approached now, even when it's something minor, there is a mentality already if they see a black or brown person.
Yeah. And I think back to when I was young, and how they would bring in the servicemen to come and talk to the classes. And what we were taught is that the police were there to protect and to serve. You guys remember those protect and to serve?
Officer
and
friendly.
Yes. Yeah.
It's written on the side of the cars.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like there was some sort of branding shift they were trying to make. That don't be afraid of us. We're here to help you. And I think, I have to say, for a little while, I kind of fed into that. I looked at the police as, we're to get in trouble, these are the people I will call. They will, they're held by their duty to do whatever that has been asked of them. But I think we're kind of reverting, as you all are saying, back to the protecting and serve. Who are they protecting? Are we protecting a certain status, the white? Yeah. And are we serving the white community, the white supremacists, and those who want to eradicate those who, not just black people, even poor people? This is a class thing as well. Don't get the same amount of treatment. And when I see to protect and to serve, that means every human being is your obligation to protect and to serve them, regardless of race, regardless of their status. Right. And we're just not seeing that right now.
I interrupt this parade of victimhood by interjecting into it the aspect that is bigger than race, and that is, by all means, the police departments are established even if there is no race. Remember Ireland and other places, the police department is established to maintain status quo. If status quo is if a part of figuring out status quo is figuring out race, then race becomes a part. In most cases, it's land ownership. Who are the landed gentry? Because the police department is established to protect them from the hungry minions on the outside. As Black people, one of the things we have to do is to embrace the ugly truth that being Black in America immediately puts you behind the 8 ball, and that's a reality. But that the issue here is broader than simply race. It is abuse of authority under color of law. And because in Nigeria, Black people abuse Black people as police officers. In England and in Great Britain, white people abuse white people under color of law. And so we have to start looking at the broader concept and then see how it, and then, later on we can You got to look at the other part of it.
I'm glad. Go ahead.
So then I would say it definitely depends on the culture and the nation at that time as to where the policing misauthority that is given and used, because if it happens in other countries, then we know that each country has its issue. If we were to stick with the US right now, we see that race is really an issue. And I wanted to say back to what Latasha was saying, that there are still some good police. There are still some who do want to serve and protect the community. But as Tally has said, there is a larger number than a few that is stated to be, a few bad apples. No, there's a lot of bad apples. All right. Because when there are shootings after shootings that occur and guns are drawn at Black and brown so much quicker than whites, I have to say it, so much quicker.
True.
So much quicker. Then there is a mentality from this country. So when we talk about the foundation and the start of the police, we go back to the sins of the nation, right? Of how in the minds we are already less thought of than the white race. We're not equal when we're looked upon. And we have lots of family and friends who are, we're not talking about them, but when we look at the race itself, when we look at the responses, because we can only go by what we see, right? When we see the responses of what's happening, it is definite that we are not equal in our treatments, in the approach, in the mentality when they see us.
There's an excuse not to have white outrage. Yeah, I said the word. There's an excuse not to have white outrage. One of the biggest things they're going to say, or you hear people say, is the police have killed more white people than Black people, and it's true. Stats wise, it is true that they have. The difference between the both, though, is that they may have to have a reason to shoot white people. No, I mean, if you're committing a crime and you feel that you are that you have to use deadly force, then by gosh, go ahead and use deadly force. The difference that I see with this is that the Blacks look like a threat to them. So it's not a second thought of whether or not they have something. The thought process is that they have a gun, or they have a weapon, or they have. How many of us have to be shot with nothing in our hands? They don't have to be looked over twice. Matter of fact, I think they have to shoot at you. I was looking at some of the rules of this thing, and I think brothers and I was having a conversation about this the other day. When a cop wakes up in the morning, he wants to come back home. Right. I mean that's obvious. We all have friends that are police officers, and I'll tell you, man, my wife kissed me like this is going to be the last kiss. My husband kissed me like this is going to be the last kiss before I leave. They're not sure. They're not sure whether they're going to come back because of what's period. This is before anything. I think the difference is that they look at us as a threat. When they they look at us as a problem almost immediately. We whole lot more just to convince them that we're people too. Come on, when I get pulled over by a police officer, the first thing I pull out next to my driver's license are ministerial credentials. I both out together. I do, so that when they look at both of them, they'll say, oh, this is what they say, white or Black. They say, oh, you're one of us. Come on. Try it, y'all. Try it.
Hey.
When you pull out your credentials, they say, oh, you a civil servant? Like I'm a civil servant. Can you slow down next time? Can you say, but what they're really saying is, nah, you ain't a hood rat. What they're saying is, I'm looking at your address. Are you from around here? You understand what I'm saying? Police officers know for the Maryland area, you have well-to-do people who live in Bowie, Maryland, or who live in this type of part of the county. They look at those things to see where it is. But if you're from DC and it has SC next to it, Southeast next to it, the first thing they're gonna think of is, whose car is this? Can you step out the car right away? But here's what I'm saying, gang. We have to do too much to be safe.
Yeah.
We should have.
And you might not even get to the point where you are able to show your license or your credentials before judgment.
We interrupt this pity party once again. I mean, one of the things victimization is real. I mean, if a child's been beaten a lot, he sees the world through the lens of I might be injured.
Right.
Black people in this country have been beaten a lot. We see it through that lens. However, we must recognize that the bigger picture has to be addressed. And that, for example, we make mention of white people don't get treated that way. That is not true.
Right.
It is that they are not as likely to be treated that way, but they do get. Let me share with you. Okay. Daniel Shaver.
I'm gonna have a problem with Tally today, but go ahead, y'all. Go ahead.
I'm here to make us think.
Go ahead.
I'm here to look. I grew up as black as it gets in Philadelphia. I ran from the cops and the robbers. So, I'm telling you, I get it. But Daniel Shaver, white guy playing with a pellet gun. Police show up, tell him to comply. He does everything that they say. They shot him dead. James Scott, he had been drinking, had a gun, dropped the gun, ran from the officers. When they caught up with him, he didn't put up his hands fast enough. They shot him dead. Let's see. There's Brandon Stanley was at a convenience store doing something. The police came. He was unarmed, shot him dead. All three of these people were white. And that's because there's something that happens to people when you give them a uniform and you give them power and you give them authority. I don't know how many of you have heard of the Zimbardo Experiment. It was an experiment conducted at Stanford University probably 40 years ago. It was an experiment conducted with students where they were going to make certain students the guards and the other students were going to be the prisoners. And when the students were made into guards, it was supposed to be an experiment that lasted a couple of weeks. But within a couple of days, they had to shut it down because the students who were made into guards became so cruel and capricious that they had to stop the experiment. And so what I'm saying is that blackness in America ramps up the abuse of authority exponentially because blacks are considered to be second-class outsiders. But the demon here, ministers of the gospel who raise our perspectives above the simple epithelial colors that wreath our skin with melanin. The demon here is the abuse of authority, the abuse of power under color of law. And we've got to aim at that first.
Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
Right?
So you're saying that in my Pathfinder uniform, I have to take out my stars. And
I've seen you become a little rougher when you put that uniform on.
Are you saying that's where police reform needs to start? Because there's a call for police reform that people need to be trained to be a little bit more sensitive and more cautious. But that abuse of power seems like it needs to move to the top of the list.
Yeah. When you consider that most times when the police abuses a person, the police have been invited into the situation. I mean, most time now, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of traffic stops and things like that. But I'm a black person and Marlena and I are having a domestic dispute. Please don't take that too far. Marlena says, I just moved into the area. I don't even know the boy. but we're having a domestic dispute. And you mean to tell me in an all-black neighborhood with all black members of my family that the way I'm going to try to quell my domestic dispute is to call some white people in a uniform that I know probably looks down upon me and my race, or at least I fear that. Why are we so subject to doing that, to calling people into our picture where we know that they represent a clear and present danger? Why is it that we can't call Uncle so-and-so? In the old days, we could. We call Uncle Harry down the street. He'd come and say, boy, you need to sit yourself down, But now, we will call, here in the city of Philadelphia, one of the most recent shootings was Walter Wallace. He was mentally disturbed.
Right.
His family called the police for a couple of hours, calling him again and again. You need to come and get him. You need to come and get him. They never mentioned mental issues until the police are on the scene and he's out there swinging a knife, and they're saying he's mental. It's too late then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bring back the Black Panthers.
No, we can't do that. But let's go on to no. But here's the thing: we have to be educated too. That's where I think the movie came of the Green Book or the Green.
The Green Book,
Green Book. And the Green Book was really for addresses or different places we could stop when we're traveling down south and different things like that. Because it was for our safety. Now we need to come out with a Black Book or an educated side of teaching our young people and teaching our people how to respond, especially how to respond to when police shows up, especially in a neighborhood that is not theirs. They're policing a neighborhood that they go back to Long Island or they go back to Annapolis or whatever the case may be, and they're policing people who they don't understand. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not getting into the wielding of the knife and all of that type of stuff. You can kill somebody. You can kill a couple of people before you get taken down. I do agree. I don't agree with her being shot that way. I'm just saying I'm not in the situation to see what's actually happening. But I do know that we've had yard fights at PS 279, or we had yard fights after school. There's been fights in bars every Friday night. There's a fight in a bar where they're breaking bottles and cutting somebody, and no one's getting shot over that. So we have to look at what's actually happening. Deadly force is the first thing that they teach a police officer. Here's the thing I wanted to tell you. That's I think GP will probably get into this Friday night. When you pull a gun as a police officer, you're not allowed to shoot up in the air.
Right.
That's endangerment.
Yeah,
you're not. Say that again.
I said it's reckless.
Yeah, it's reckless endangerment. You can't shoot a gun up in the air and say, these TV stuff is not true. Be quiet. Pop, pop, pop. That's not true. When they pull it, they're authorized to use it.
Yeah.
And when they're authorized to use it, you should not be able to lift your hands after they use it. So they're always going center mass and they're always going headshot, no matter what it is. And I know we had this argumentative last week when we were talking about extremities. I see it all over Facebook. Why can't they shoot him in the arm? Why can't they shoot him in the leg? Why can't they shoot him in? And I know Marlene, we were talking about that last week. You can't shoot him in the leg, and you can't.
My vote is that it can be changed to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I'm gonna tell you this: police or no police, I take it out. I'm going center mass.
Marlene, have you ever been to a shooting range?
I have. And as a matter of fact, when I was a part of the Virginia Ministerium, we did a simulation of being in a shooting range, right? And it was, in other words, we took the place of the police, right? So we did this little video and someone was coming towards me and I had to shoot, right? If I felt that I was being violated. But guess what? In my assimilation, the person was coming towards me. The person was not running away from me. They were not getting into a car and I shot them. They were coming towards me to harm me physically. And yes, I shot them. Now, I was not a perfect shooter.
Was this a firearm or was this a simulated weapon?
Oh, this was a simulated weapon.
Then you have not been to a shooting range.
Okay, no. So we went.
You took the long way around telling me.
Yeah. Okay, but listen, I was in the place of assimilating.
Feeling threatened and wanting to protect yourself.
I tell you what, my colleague. I am going to take you to a shooting range.
I don't like guns like that.
I don't care. I mean, the reason why I'm going to do it is because I want to take you to a range so that you can, and a friend of mine who's an undercover officer says typically that when an officer draws a weapon, the first shot typically hits the floor because you're shooting as soon as you unsheath that thing. The adrenaline is rising. There's action everywhere. Now, you remember at a shooting range, ain't nobody moving. The target's just staring at you. But when you got somebody saying, calling you out of your name and there are people yelling at you from every side, and there's action everywhere, your adrenaline is going through the roof. You pull that weapon, the first shot probably goes astray. The second shot might go up in the air. It's probably, he says, by the third shot, you're zeroed in. But here's the deal. When you feel that weapon kick like a mule in your hand, and you are a lot of times you're either running or somebody else is running, and you're trying to make sure that your target is not in a place where you can injure other targets. And you fire, in the movies, you see people fire like this. You fire that gun, the report, attacks your eardrum, your arm flies up in the air, you're trying to steady that thing. The last thing you want to do is you see my hand right there? Try to hit that. And when we go to the range, I'm telling you, you're going to feel a little differently.
Let me just say this, and because I don't want to. Training that comes in, the training has to change, and it's not necessarily in what they do, it's how. Because no matter what happens, if my son or my daughter decide to be a police officer, and I'd be really upset if they said, "Well, I saw the gun." No, forget it. They won't say anything. They'll be dead, right? I don't. So what I want them to do, as far as police officers are concerned, I want them to be able to teach them the first reaction, what to do during the first reaction. I am not going to. I don't want them to tell them, shoot here or be careful when you're shooting. One of the things that I saw on CNN is that one was upset because when he was shooting after her, there are other people in the area that you could have shot. I mean, that you could have shot. You understand what I'm saying? So that's reckless, and as it is by itself. My thing is not necessarily that we ought to train them where to shoot, like extremities or whatever. They need to think first when they come out and their heart is racing and they're sweating and their eyeballs are dilated, their pupils are dilated, and it's dark around them, and they become focused on stopping just one thing happening. We got to be able to teach them, or to be able to retrain them on that thought process, because the thought process they have right now, in my estimation, may not be true. In my estimation, is I got to go back home. And me, you're not as deep as my wife and children, and you're not even black. I mean, you're not even white. You're not even. They don't look at us as people. So my thing is, they need to be retaught.
Yeah, and this whole level of aggression. I mean, kind of going back to what Tally was saying about the abuse of power. When I was watching on Verdict Day, the George Floyd murder trial, one of the commentators on the network I was watching was saying one of the things that disturbed him. He was a former police chief or of some sort. He was saying one of the things that just totally threw him off was how, these gentlemen, these officers who were just fresh out of the police academy were throwing the F-bomb, came out with a gun. Like, that was their first thought to do. And we're not trained to do that, to come with that much aggression and cursing. And, you automatically are making the situation more hostile than it needs to be. And when I look online and I see so many people sharing the experiences that they've had with the police, the PTSD that's out there, and most of it came from the officer making them feel like they were less than human, that they could yell, that they could be tossed aside, even threatening them, say something if you want, have your life in my hands. That type of aggression. And a lot of people had not even shared these stories until now because of how it impacted them. It's almost like someone who has been abused, sexually abused. Sometimes there's a shame associated with it because someone made them feel so powerless and helpless. And for me, it's, even though I believe there are some good cops out there, the amount of trauma that doesn't necessarily result in death that we hear about or see about, but the amount of trauma that individuals have had at the aggression of the police, even if they weren't physically harmed, the mental abuse that it causes for so many is so disturbing for me, and not even realizing the impact until these situations happen and more people are starting to speak out. So I mean, that's really sad.
Can I just say this real quick? I know this is about shooting. Tally talked about the abuse of power, period. Right? Sometimes you see police pull over pull over people. They're pulling them over on the wrong side of the street because they're like you can't tell them what to do. They sometimes follow women. I mean, I have to be honest with you. I know a lady that told me that she saw the police officer in the store with her, and when she got in her car and drove away, he followed her and pulled her over. It's abuse of power, right? This is, and it basically really because he wanted a phone number. You understand what I'm saying?
I was going to say, it sounded like he was hitting her. Yeah,
yeah, but I'm just saying that's still an abuse of power. No matter
it is.
So get to the place of you know, I always say this: too much is given, much is required, right? You have to have the ability to be able to say, I can't use this uniform for A, B, and C. Tupac got off from shooting these two men because they had their badges on the inside. They didn't have their badges on the outside to say that they were police officers. So in other words, they forgot to take it out when they were harassing him. You understand what I'm saying? So the thing is, they have this innate thing within them. They could park anywhere they want. You don't have friends. I have friends that will give me their stickers that you could park anywhere that you want. It's an abuse of power. It's simple. And that's why I believe that Black officers should police Black neighborhoods. I do believe that that you should police your own neighborhood. Then you'll know how to treat people. That's how it was with Irish. When the Irish and the Italians in New York City, they were policing their own neighborhoods, which made them corrupt. But that's another.
I was going to say that.
There were still abuses of power there, but you did not have the added burden of bigotry, discrimination, and prejudice.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's just that this guy was a no good. Well, he was just a no good guy. And truthfully, there's something to be said about that. If we want to stop having to wrestle with, was this a matter of prejudice? Because the truth of the matter is, in America, racism is a constant black backdrop on everything. It's always there. It's like the funk of an old wet dog in a small room. It permeates everything, and it's always there. So, you know, you can't get around it. If an officer says, I don't see black or I don't see white, you know he's lying or he's stupid, because everybody does.
So I wanted to share 3 facts before we pivot and prepare to land. So the American police force represents the deadliest police culture in the industrialized world.
It does.
Over the past year, 990, that's almost 1,000 people, y'all, were killed by the police, and less than 2% of officer-related shootings resulted in criminal convictions. So why do they keep getting away with it? Why is there no accountability? What can we do to bring about the change that we need?
Well, I think like when Tally was giving his speech, I want to say, concerning his speech towards me concerning going into the shooting gallery, right? And how it's a difference when you hold the gun and it's all this adrenaline and you're hyped about this situation that it's almost like you have seconds to make the right decisions. And so in those seconds, you have to know exactly what to do. If every time they shoot and it's thought of in that way, well, hey, you know, it's a quick decision to make. When you feel that gun and you're in control and all these thoughts are going through your head, it's me or them, then it is allowed. And that's why you see these police unions. They're always saying, even with Chauvin, it's like, we're going to get you off. You know, we're going to support you. It wasn't your fault. You know, you have videos. You see exactly what happened. But it's always received because it's either them or us mentality, right? And so to me, if you are a professional and you have been trained, right? They know what to do in a shooting gallery. You are trained. How is it that a traffic stop becomes a deadly issue with a young kid or anyone and is treated the same as if you were going into let's talk about something they do, a mass shooting, right? You're going into a mass shooting in the supermarket, right? Because this guy has come in and just decided to shoot and kill everybody because he was having a bad day. All right. Or well, I know that was to follow the quote that was in the various Asian salons, right? The young guy did that. But even those who go and do the mass shootings, right? They go in and do these things.
No,
I
Marlene,
just
you are
see.
right. You're right. No, I'm sorry.
Let me
You're
say this before you come. I
Mhm.
feel, because even I'm telling you, I travel a lot, right? In my travels, my mentality now is when I see a person pulled over, I'm trying to make sure everything is all right.
with them.
You see what I'm saying? With them. Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to make sure they're safe. You know,
Yep.
so I'm looking like, oh man, do I need to pull over and take out my camera? You know, it's that thought process now, because I see a difference. And I understand but there's some real adrenaline. And when they see my face, and my face is not white, that there is a change. And I'll say this before one of you guys take over.
Yeah.
I'm coming into my neighborhood, a middle-class neighborhood, well mixed. Something happened at the service station on the corner, and so we are not allowed to drive on the approaching side, the incoming, right? And so there's no car coming through the outgoing lane, right? No car coming. There are a couple of police there standing. All the police are over on the other side. Traffic is blocked. Yet and still, I'm in a large community. I need to get home, right? So I drive up to the officer. I respectfully say and ask, may I cut through here just to go to the other side? Do you know what he said to me? He said, who do you think you are to drive in this neighborhood? Like, who do you think you are? And I'm a preacher of the gospel.
Uh-oh.
Wow.
I'm a preacher of the gospel. But my mentality went to, who do you think you are talking to me like that? That's my thought now. Jesus kept me calm. I said, sir, there is no way to enter on the other side. There was no outgoing traffic. So I safely drove up to you to ask you, could I go over? Guys, if you could have seen his look at me, I'm driving a minivan, so I'm looking like a mom, right? I'm approaching my neighborhood, right, where I pay taxes for your job, and you approach me like that for just a question? So automatically now, guys, they cause us, as Tally was saying, the abuse of power, they cause us also to have a certain mentality about them.
Right.
So now that I know in the simplest of issues, I am watching them because they are already protected. They're already protected by their unions, by their colleagues to say, hey, man, you know, that was something that just happened. They shoot lives. It now becomes a numbness to them. It's easy to kill. I just wonder, you know, they said before, when you shoot somebody the first time, just the remorse and the mental anguish that goes through when you shoot a person. Well, what about when you've done it several times? What do they feel? Anyway.
Or actually it escalates. You don't get to the shooting yet. You just abuse till you shoot them. And these guys are not good. You know, you shoot somebody, you should be sitting in a psychological warfare after killing somebody. This guy, you heard his conversation after he knelt. Let's go back to it. As he knelt on George Floyd. I mean, it's amazing how he's dead. He's in the ambulance and it's life as usual. Wow. But it has always been that way. If we didn't have film, if we didn't have people with their cameras out, if they didn't have the body cams that were put out nowadays, we would have never known half of the things that's been going on.
You know, GP asked a question as to, you know, the 2% conviction rate. Police officers have, and this is being debated now in legislation, police officers have something that is legally imposed called qualified immunity. It was established by the Supreme Court in the 1960s that removes them from culpability unless you can clearly demonstrate that you have violated someone's rights. And so what you and I do is different from what they are allowed to do. And And it's time to change that. But I mean, more than that, we have to change what we anticipate or expect from police. We have to stop thinking that a policeman is the person you call if there's a neighborhood dispute, or a police is the person you call if you can't deal with your children, or if the wife and husband are arguing, or if a cat's in a tree, because police are trained to break things, make noise, and kill people. And if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And we need to have a diverse approach to handling civic ills that don't include bringing people in with a 9mm handgun strapped to their hip.
So training is both ways.
Yeah.
It's not just for the police, it's for
us.
It's for us to be able to know how and when music is playing out in somebody's house, we call the police. All these, and they come with something. They come as authority. It kind of reminds me of the house Negro.
Don't forget that, Pat. Think about us as pastors. A member calls and says, "Pastor, Deacon so-and-so told me that I couldn't put my bag on the counter." When you show up for that conversation, don't you just want to haul off and slap the cowboy urine out of both of them for bothering you with that? Now, how do you? I mean, you're a police officer. Think about it now. And look, I am not trying to overhumanize them. Think about two police officers, Biff Hotstadler and Chad Durabakken from some suburban community, and here they are being called in the middle of Bed-Stuy because Pookie and Ray Ray can't figure out how to get along, and then they show up.
No, they just shoot Pookie and Ray Ray. They just shoot them.
And somebody called them. Because they didn't know what Pookie and Ray Ray were doing. They show up, and as soon as they show up, the people who called them say, now don't be acting like this, and what? As a pastor, when you show up, everybody knows exactly what you ought to do, and don't nobody know what you should do. When the police officer shows up, everybody knows exactly what they ought to do, and don't nobody know what they ought to do.
It's true.
So you got an instant tension that you have invited into your life. And then when it goes south, you act like something happened that you shouldn't have expected.
So there's a quote that says, if you're not speaking out, you are being complicit with the oppression. So there's a large number of people, even in the Adventist church, who don't like to talk about this issue that we're talking about. This whole episode to them is like, why are they talking about this? Why? I thought they were, Seventh-day Adventist Christians. Why are they wasting their breath talking about this? But why is it important for us to talk about it as a church?
Listen, I'm gonna tell you this, and I know when my mother sees my face on here, she's gonna listen. My mother hated. She absolutely hates it when we talk about politics and when we're talking about social justice. She just feels like social justice is going to get you killed. I mean, literally, that's how she feels. And if she feels that way, imagine the amount of people that feel the same way. That I don't want to get into it. It's not my business. Let's leave it the way it's supposed to be. I know that that's how my mother feels, and she cringes when my brothers and I get together and start talking about things of political or of police brutality, especially from the standpoint of Jesus will take care of it all. Right? Not even talking about that. I mean, Jesus was the biggest social justice activist we've ever had, and he's always talked about the poor. He's always talked about the widow. He's always talked about these things, and yet we don't want to say anything because we are afraid that our next door neighbor will see it and won't like us anymore, or you're too far-fetched on this, or they may say you're racist. That's the biggest one right there, that you're racist. So we have to say something about it. We have to be vocal about it. If we're not vocal about it, you're basically saying, hey, I'm with it.
And we have to go.
Sorry, go right ahead.
No, go ahead,
go ahead.
No, I was just saying, and we have to go beyond. Oh, we're both. Okay, I mean it this time. Go, Marlene.
Go ahead.
So you go.
So if I may say, because we just brought out that Jesus, he was totally for justice and not for injustice, right? Is there echo with me speaking?
No,
okay,
we hear
great. If Jesus hated injustice, he said to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. When we speak against injustice, isn't that me loving my neighbor? Isn't that me standing up for those who cannot speak for themselves? If I am to love them as I love myself, and let's say even now, I'm very political because I don't like the mistreatment of people, and I want to make sure that all people are treated well, right? So if I was against such a thing, would that be that here I don't want to stand for the love of my brother or my sister? I say, oh, just let God handle it. Isn't there a responsibility of me as God's servant to help those who are in need? So if I see someone being mistreated, I will speak against this. And also in the origination of our church, we were abolitionists to slavery. Where did we lose our voice and our love to speak for someone from the early 1800s, whenever we started, right? We were speaking against, the mistreatment of the blacks. And now, oh, well, let's let Jesus handle it. We've become passive. That is not godly.
It's
that
salary.
is not standing.
It's not godly. It's salary. It's called a salary. That's what it's called.
Mercy. Even though
well, even for those who just think we should be silent, those who think we should not march, those who think we should not stand for our rights, we should just be passive and say, well, Jesus is going to have. I'm not retaliating when I speak my voice. I'm speaking my voice so that I can be heard and so that there can be a change, because I speak my voice in love and I speak my voice, in peace. Right? I'm not throwing bottles. I'm not cursing at you, but I'm speaking to let you know that I am human. I deserve to be treated with respect the same way that you do. And not only you, but my brother and my sister, no matter their color. I just happen to be standing right now because me, in my black race, black and browns, right? We are mostly, and the poor of all colors, we are mostly being mistreated.
And I want to go a little step further with that speaking out and the protesting. I was watching a conversation recently where they were saying it's good to protest, it's good to speak out, but we also have to get to the point where we're involved in legislation, where we're paying attention to our local officials and what they believe on these issues that mean to us, and voting people into office who hold the same beliefs as we do. Sometimes we're out there, speaking our voice and causing a riot, if you will, yet we don't participate in our local elections, and we have officials who vote against the very things that we're marching for. So it's like, I know some of us, even at Vintage Church, people, separation of church and state, they're afraid to be too vocal about political things because what if we do this and then we can't worship on the Sabbath? Like I've heard people, have that kind of fear that if I'm too involved in politics, then I may lose my rights because I'm bringing this to the forefront, which means they'll target me next. But God has not given us the spirit of fear. And as you said, Marlena, he has called on us as Christians to stand up for the rights of our fellow human beings. And when we see mistreatment taking place, we have to say something, and not just say something, but do something. And
Amen.
Being in legislation is so important.
My final comment would be that theologically, there is nothing in Scripture or in the heart of God that is more important than justice. And I mean, when in Micah, when it says, he's shown you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you except to, but to do just, in other words, to treat people in a just way. And then when people, after being treated justly, don't act right, to love mercy, to provide forbearance for those who haven't learned, like you, how to do justly. And then when you deal with these people who don't act right and you've given them mercy, and now you really want to kill them, he says, then you come and walk humbly with your God, because that'll bring you back to the fact that maybe I ought to give them another chance, because God does that for us. And I mean, God identifies himself in Romans chapter 3 as the God who is first just.
Amen. Amen.
And then the justifier of those who need justice. And so it should be our first course rather than the third, trying to give people off pork chops and teach them how to go to church on the right day. It is, are you being treated? Because at the heart of every human evil is the brokenness that is derived from being treated unfairly and unjustly.
You preaching, Tally. You preaching.
Yes.
I'm going to take an offering next.
Well,
I got some money for you, sir. That's good stuff. You're saying good stuff.
That's rich.
There's my last comment.
Well, this has been a wonderful discussion, and we want you all to continue the conversation. It doesn't stop here. We want you to be civically engaged and also informed, and talk to someone in your community, your pastor, someone in your church, and figure out what you can do to bring about the change that we need to see. So, Latasha, can you tell us how we can continue the conversation with the upsetters in our comments?
Sure. Of course, we always invite you to email us. We like to read your comments. We'll bring them onto the show and share what your thoughts are about all of this. So upset@aecsda.com. Of course, if you comment, if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, any comments you put in the chat area, we will see, and we'll bring you your thoughts into the dialogue. So we want to hear from you too. We know you're just upset about some of these issues as we are, and we want your voices to be heard.
I think it's awesome. Is it possible that since GP has an addition to this world, can we get a look at her, or she's down for the count?
Hold on one second. I'll bring her.
I love the baby.
Isn't it amazing how a baby can bring you, and they don't do anything. Babies are absolutely worthless.
They're innocent. That's so
worthless.
I mean, by
aside from bringing you joy.
I mean, when you think about it, they are the most self-centered thing existing.
Tally, hold on. For those who just heard him say that, just for the upset.
Here's where you can email your complaints. Being told
I mean, it is. Babies give us the opportunity to be godlike because they're nothing. They can't do a thing for us. They're totally self-absorbed. Yet we love them, and they give us such hope.
Yes.
It is magic. It's magic.
Yeah, and these little beings are what we fight for. Oh, there she is.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my. I'm sorry. I got a spotlight.
That is amazing.
How precious, little Elizabeth Grace.
How can you stand it?
Oh, she's getting ready to grow a beard, just like Justin.
No, we rebuke that right now.
You're muted. Yeah, you're muted because I know she was making some.
That's just amazing.
We want to hear the cooing. We want
to bring spotlight.
Hey.
Oh, let me spotlight again.
That is amazing. I mean,
there we go.
He kissed her and she started crying. I used to hear that from all the girls from.
Look at
that yawn.
Just amazing.
So precious.
That milk breath. Everybody,
He's hungry.
Cash at me, and I think I'll get.
Congrats again. She's beautiful.
Thank you.
Amazing, man.
Wonderful, Daddy. Wonderful.
Yes.
So pretty.
We thank you. Thank you for leading out.
Thank God for Jackie.
Good job.
Good job, Jackie. Good job, Jackie.
But it's been fun. I'm glad that we could start with an upset but end with something that's beautiful as baby Elizabeth. So thank you so much for sharing her with us, and we hope to watch her grow in God's grace. Thank you guys so much. All right, team, until the next time, until the next upset, we'll see you later.
Take care, everybody.
Amen. Thank you for joining us.